billions of people around the world live in highly populated cities. If you're lucky enough to have your own home, then you probably don't live as close to your neighbors as an apartment dweller might. Still, it takes cooperation to live beside someone for years and not face disagreements. Today, we're going to see a man with the creative solution to a barking dog, a guy with more truck than brains, and a disagreement visible from space. Hold on tight, subscribe to the channel, and let's take a closer look at the 10 craziest people who took revenge on their neighbors. Number 10. High-flying bird. Just before Christmas 2012, Sarah Childs of Denham Springs, Louisiana, came outside to find her beloved dog missing. Pushed to the brink emotionally, she concluded, with no evidence, that the dog had been stolen by her neighbor. With no evidence and no legal discourse, Sarah decided to make her feelings known in a more festive way. When it came time to erect her Christmas lights, Sarah took a creative approach, arranging her Christmas lights into a giant middle finger on her roof. The neighbors understandably took offense and responded by calling the police, who responded by threatening to issue Sarah a $400 fine for the large obscenity. At this point, many people would have licked their wounds, taken down the lights, and continued with their lives. But not Sarah. Sarah enlisted the help of the American Civil Liberties Union and took the issue to court, where she was able to bar the police and the city of Denham Springs from intervening. This meant that every time her neighbors left their house at night, they were greeted by a giant middle finger, both literally and metaphorically. Well, eventually, January came along, and the new year was underway when the following Christmas rolled around. Sarah re-illuminated the pointed display of anger. It was then that a fed-up neighbor climbed onto her roof, cut up all the lights, and left them on her lawn. If you were wondering how all that happened without her noticing, the answer is pretty simple. She didn't live there anymore, but she hadn't sold the house. Instead, she lived elsewhere but maintained the house simply to spite her neighbors. Now that's commitment. If you think Sarah found a creative way to get revenge, wait until you see our number 1 entry, a farmer with an incredible plan for justice. Number 9. Crappy neighbors. As we will see time and time again in today's list, conflict resolution isn't easy, and some people will make revenge look hard. The woman in this next story had grown tired of her neighbor's dogs wandering onto her property and defecating on her lawn. Fed up, she decided to return the favor. Unfortunately, it seems her local rescue was fresh out of puppies, so she had to take things into her own, hands? Enlisting the help of 2 friends, the woman perched atop the fence and hung her rear end over into the offending neighbor's yard to, well, do the do, if you will. Not a lot is known of what took place in the aftermath of the incidents, and this picture of the woman and her 2 friends is some of the only photographic evidence of the events. But then again, how much more do we really want to see? Before we go on, like this video, pop the subscribe button, and ring the notification bell right now, or the ghost in your closet will manifest itself tonight. Number 8. Story with a twist. If you've ever lived next door to a pack of constantly barking dogs, you'll know just how annoying it can be. It can be especially troubling if you work from home or require abject silence for another reason, such as a sleeping child. Of course, people are allowed to own dogs and other people are entitled to their peace. So ideally, it would come down to open communication and compromise. Unfortunately, this isn't an option for everybody. 50-year-old Andrew Nicklin of Northhurst Road, West Heath, Birmingham, became fed up with his neighbor Catherine Farrell's Yorkshire Terrier, Buster, who he claimed barked relentlessly. Andrew, an amateur drummer, happened to have a small amount of recording equipment on hand and used it to capture Buster's barking in high quality, a sound he played back over the fence repeatedly at loud volumes, one time until 3 a.m. While Andrew certainly embraced the spirit of giving Catherine a taste of her own medicine, he did wind up in court for harassment, so it may have been a touch short-sighted. Number 7. Destructive solution. Residents of a 3-story flat were experiencing a constant and bitter argument over parking spaces, when one resident decided to be the bigger person, or rather the bigger vehicle. After repeatedly asking the 3rd-story neighbors not to park in the laneway, one person completely ran out of patience, which was apparent when he used his jacked-up Ford Excursion to squash the offending Taurus. While we aren't sure exactly if this Ford-on-Ford violence paid off, it's probably fair to say that the 3rd-story neighbors probably didn't park their vehicles there again. Number 6. When your neighbor is a supervillain. This entry even makes the woman who defecated over a fence seem pretty normal. One man became fed up with his neighbors constantly playing loud music and decided to get his own particular brand of revenge. He did so by equipping a drone with fireworks. He then proceeded to bomb his neighbor's house. Fortunately for us, The entire thing was caught on tape, and the video of this cartoon-style revenge plot went viral. Number 5. Snow Way. Our next entry involves a lack of winter manners. When this guy's neighbor decided to throw all his snow shoveling into his neighbor's yard, the newly snowed-in neighbor decided to get revenge by shoveling all the snow plus a little of his own back over the fence to the offending neighbor. Tragically, while the revenge shoveling was captured on film, the neighbor's reaction wasn't, but we can only imagine. Number 4. Color Rage. Of all the reasons for a neighborly feud, this is probably the least justified on today's list. In 2009, Cindy and Brian Zecchinelli of Washington State built a garage apartment, much to the chagrin of their neighbors. It wasn't the structure itself that was the cause of the conflict. Instead, it was the color of it and their entire house that set people off their neighbor Brian Jewell banded together, with over 24 other neighbors claiming that the bright purple color was lowering their property value. Whether there was anything to these claims or not is uncertain, but either way, Brian Jewell decided to make his feelings known. Having a large grass area that butted up against Zecchinelli's property, he decided to exact his revenge via lawn care when he mowed the word "a-hole" into his grass with an arrow facing Zecchinelli's house. Way to keep it classy, Washington. Number 3. Your Second Amendment hard at work. If you happen to live next to a neighbor with a gun, the stakes of any dispute suddenly feel a little bit higher. This was the case for a pair of neighbors from Louisville, Kentucky. It seems the neighbors were feuding over noise, not exactly a rare occurrence. But in this case, the 78-year-old gun-toting neighbor decided to escalate things. He did this by presumably trying to make a louder noise when he approached his neighbors and opened fire on their vehicles with a .22 caliber rifle, unloading 35 rounds into 3 cars. Fortunately, nobody was injured, but several vehicles were riddled with bullet holes. While it's unclear if his pain paid off, we're pretty sure the gun-toting lunatic came out on the losing end of his altercations. Number 2. Money plus entitlement equals questionable choices. It's hard to deny that with money comes a certain level of privilege, but just how far does that extend? One Cinderford, Gloucestershire millionaire decided to test that for himself. Graham Wilden is an accountant in the UK town of 8,000, and sometime around 2012, he began construction on a massive 10,000 square foot private leisure center for himself and his grandchildren. Graham built the center without approval, which he claims he didn't need due to a series of legal loopholes. According to his neighbors, the massive structure is an eyesore and blocks their view. According to Graham and his partner, the massive structure is hardly even visible. The truth is probably somewhere in between. To be fair, 10,000 square feet is a pretty big structure in a residential neighborhood. The incredible structure contains a 16-seat cinema, casino, bowling alley, bar, squash court, and a 25-foot-tall, 3-story tall doll's house, a play area, and indoor tennis and badminton courts. At their wits' end, one of his immediate neighbors erected a 12-foot fence to block their view of the building. While this may seem like a manageable solution for both parties, Graham was not impressed and decided to do something about it. In a fit of rage, Graham physically tore the fence down with his bare hands. As it turns out, local officials did oppose the structure, and since 2017, he has been repeatedly ordered to tear it down and repeatedly refused. But as of June 2021, he has been given a suspended jail term for contempt, but the building's still standing. Number 1. Trouble parking. Some of the stories on today's list have been the type where it's kind of hard to tell who's in the right and who's in the wrong. This entry, however, is one where it's pretty easy to side with the vindictive party. A Croatian farmer found himself in a situation when every week, hundreds of vehicles would park on his land to attend a local flea market. Not only was this ethically wrong, it also caused damage to his field. Fed up and receiving little support from local authorities, he found a different solution. Being a farmer, he did what farmers do. He plowed his field. In doing so, he didn't damage any vehicles, but he did trap each row of cars between thick piles of boggy loose dirt, and that only a large 4-wheel drive vehicle would be able to exit without help. When the shoppers returned, they realized their cars would take hours to extract. Their first reaction was to phone the police. Unfortunately, the man blowing his own land was legally in the clear. The 100+ trespassers, not so much. While no one was charged, they more than learned their lesson after fighting to retrieve their vehicles from a practical ocean of dirt. That's all for 10 craziest people who took revenge on their neighbors. Which one was your favorite? Have you ever taken revenge on a neighbor? Let us know in the comments.